At the bottom of my garden is my fairyland. It is only small, but it is so precious to me. It is my little woodland, even though it is tiny. I have a seat in there, and crystals hanging from the trees, and all manner of things which people have given to me. Beautiful things. There are fairies and toadstools on the ground. It is such a lovely place to be. Even though I have many spring bulbs in there, I longed for a rose tree, but I knew that a rose tree would not grow in such a dark place, for the trees create great shade. I searched and searched, and eventually I found a tree which resembled a wild rose, and I knew that it could grow here. And so I have my rose tree. And here is a story of another rose tree. A long time ago, there was a lady called Rose, and she lived in the woods. She had a tiny cottage, and she loved her life. It was a very simple life. Rose was a healer, and she loved to collect berries and leaves and roots and all manner of things from nature. And she created her healing potions. She would take them out to the surrounding villages and sell them to people. And she was well known, for her healing brought help to many. Rose lived in the woods, but she was so at home here, for she was not like other people. She could see into other worlds. She could see people who had long since gone, people who came to give her help from the worlds of spirit. She could talk and communicate with the animals, and they were not afraid of her. And she used her gifts to find the best plants and ingredients for her medicines. Rose longed for a rose tree to plant next to her cottage, and although she knew that one really would not grow in the woods, she went out of the woods and into the fields, and she found a wild rose tree, a pink wild rose, and she brought it home. She planted her rose next to the cottage, and much to her delight, it bloomed and it bloomed. It is an amazing thing that when you love plants, they receive that love and they grow even better. Just like people, they too grow when you love them. Rose made many remedies from her rose tree. She used the rose hips to make syrups. And she made rose water from the petals. And she dried the petals also. She made all manner of healing potions and creams. She knew instinctively always what to make. People loved her rose remedies, for they were very special indeed. For Rose's rose tree was very special. It grew and grew and flourished and bloomed, and it bloomed with her love. But the day came when Rose had fulfilled her earthly work, and it was time for her to return to the light, to her cottage in the light. She had completed her tasks, and she left the earth. But it is a strange thing that after she died, so did the rose tree. In its sorrow and without her love, it withered away. In time to come, the cottage crumbled and moss took over, and there were no signs of Rose having lived here. But one day, many, many years later, a lady who came to the area to visit a relative was out walking, for she loved to explore. And on her walk, she noticed the wood. And so she couldn't resist, for she loved woods, and she entered into the wood. The feeling here, she loved it, and it felt strangely familiar. She walked deeper into the wood, and eventually she came upon a blooming wild pink rose. The delight in her heart was huge. She was astounded. But as she stood there, memories began to come into her mind, and she began to remember. And the rose had remembered too, for even though it had withered away after Rose died, its roots had remained alive beneath the ground. But it knew that one day a lady would come, and the rose knew it would come back to life just for this lady. And so it bloomed again. And the lady remembered, for she was Rose, and she had lived here. The joy in her heart, for she had been Rose in another lifetime. And it was as though she had found another piece of herself. It was so joyful. And the lady too had carried on the work of Rose, for she was a healer, and she loved to heal with all the things of the earth. It was her passion. And she remembered. And she remembered more. She was Rose, and she had been guided back here to remember. And it reminded her that whatever dies comes back to life, and that we are the same as the plants and the trees, for they die, but their roots remain alive under the ground, and they come back to life. And the roots of the trees and the plants are like our roots, for our roots are in the light. And we return again and again. And we return to carry on and continue our work. The lady felt complete, and she felt so blessed to have been brought back to a place she knew so well. And she carried with her the light of the wild rose within her heart. And from that day, it meant so, so much to her. And she would never, ever forget it. That was the story of Rose. But it is my story, for I visited a relative a long way away, and I found the wood, and I found a wild rose blooming in the very center of the wood, and I remembered who I had been. I remembered.